Have you ever wondered what happens during the interview process? Well, if so, it's part of a larger equation of 5 different steps for the entire hiring and job search process. Hey, I'm Abby and welcome back to the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about what each of those 5 different steps are for the entire hiring process, which includes the pre-interview, the interview, and the post-interview process. Before we jump into that, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're looking forward to learning a little bit more about what happens during the interview process. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and remember to hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. So when it comes to the overall interview process, as well as just general job filling process, there are 5 different steps that you should be aware of so that you're very knowledgeable about the overall process that goes into applying for and getting hired for a job. So the very first step in this process is for you to apply. Now, from a hiring manager or employer perspective, this isn't the first step in the process. They have to go through the job description, they have to write the job posting, they have to figure out all the logistics behind it. But that doesn't really matter to you as a candidate. So for the employer, there's that part of the job filling process. And for you as a candidate, you only care once the job is posted and you submit your application. Once you've submitted your application and you've done the actual application step of the job search process, now we're in the pre-interview phase. The pre-interview phase is on the hiring team. This might include the recruiter, this might include the hiring manager, additional people from their team, or HR. During this process, the hiring team or the recruiter will review applications. They will review the candidates who have applied. They will review the resumes and the cover letters that have been uploaded. They will review the actual application that you as a candidate have filled out. And then, based off of that information, they will begin to rank their candidates. And they'll rank them in order of preference to interview. People they want to interview the most, and people that they're not really interested in interviewing. So when it comes to this process of ranking candidates, it typically goes like this. The first question that's asked is, does this candidate meet the minimum qualifications? The minimum qualifications required to be successful in this job. The answer is either yes or no. If the answer is no, then that candidate is no longer considered as a part of this process. If the answer is yes, then the next question is, does this candidate meet preferred qualifications? If so, which ones? If the answer is no, the candidate doesn't meet preferred qualifications, they're not immediately rejected, but they're not immediately considered for an interview. If the candidate has some or all of the preferred qualifications, then they're likely added to the interview rank list. The people who the hiring team wants to interview the most. The people they're most eager about getting to know better, because this is likely someone who will make a great employee. Once the hiring team has kind of developed their list of potential candidates to interview, then they actually start to enter the interview process. The hiring team, the recruiter, someone from HR, someone will likely reach out to those candidates requesting an interview. The candidates will likely be able to select from predetermined dates and times for interviews so that they can somewhat self-schedule an interview for themselves. In other situations, the hiring team or the recruiter might reach out to a candidate and say, we have this specific time frame available. Are you available as well? And then it can be a back and forth about what works best for everyone's schedules. If you are notified that you have been selected for an interview, at the latest, this is when you begin your interview preparation. Ideally, you will have begun your interview preparation ahead of time, and that would include conducting mock interviews, figuring out your answers to very common interview questions, reviewing the job posting to figure out if you can design some questions specifically for this role that are behavior-based or even technical-based. While you are preparing for the interview, the interviewers are also preparing for the interview. They are determining what type of interview this would be. Is it going to be a phone interview? Is it going to be a virtual interview? Is it going to be an in-person interview? Is there going to be an assessment phase of the interview? They will also design questions for this interview and for this role. So it will probably take them several days to generate specific questions for this role. They might have very generic interview questions that are asked during all of their interviews for the organization, but it's also very likely that they will have role-specific questions for this specific position. So once they've determined what those questions will be that they will ask during the interview process, then they actually hold the interview with the candidates that they've invited. Once the interviews have concluded, they enter the post-interview phase. This is where the hiring team or the recruiters, whoever was involved in the interview process, will actually review and evaluate those candidates based on how the interviews went. They will make a decision on who they are moving forward and who they are not moving forward with. Now, in a perfect world, they let the people who they are not moving forward with know that they're not moving forward with them before they let the people who they are moving forward with know that they're moving forward. This is just to prevent any delay in communication and to really keep the hiring process moving. Feedback would also be provided as needed for the candidates, both those who are being moved forward and those who are not moving forward. Now, this interview phase and the post-interview phase may be repeated as many times as needed. It could be repeated 0 times. They might only have 1 round of interviews, but it's likely going to be repeated at least 1 more time for a total of 2 interviews, if not 3 or 4 interviews. My preference from a hiring perspective is 2 interviews. I feel like 2 interviews gives you a good idea of who these people are, the skills that they're capable of, with the understanding that this is an interview and they're putting their best foot forward. So we have to be objective about that and recognize that while we're in this interview process, we as the hiring team are showing up as our best selves and the interviewee is showing up as their best selves. So there's only so much you can do to really understand how this other person will show up on the job. And there's only so much that we can do as an organization to really display how we act as a team, what our culture is like, etc. So in my professional opinion, 2 interviews is really what's needed for almost every job. Once you've repeated the interview process and the post-interview process as many times as needed, you've decided on a candidate, you move into the actual hiring process. During the hiring process, there are possible background checks. There are possible reference checks that occur. And this is really where the negotiations begin. The hiring team, the organization, the potential employer will likely give a candidate an offer. Then that is when the candidate can then negotiate for that offer. Negotiations could be anything ranging from salary, so the amount of money that you bring home on a regular basis, to other benefits like pay time off. How much do you accrue? How much do you start with banked when you start your first day? Maybe you can negotiate your 401k contributions from the organization. So there are many other different types of benefits that you could negotiate during this step of the hiring process. You could also negotiate things like your start date, if you're going to be working remotely or hybrid or fully in person. So there are things to consider beyond just negotiating salary. Once negotiations have come to a place where both parties agree, the candidate as well as the hiring manager or the organization, then it's time to draft an official acceptance letter. The organization will do this. The employee or the potential employee and candidate will accept the offer, and then you hopefully make it to your actual start date. Once you've made it to your start date, the whole process has concluded. So the entire hiring process and interview process ranges from about a month to 2 months, sometimes more. And it's because there's all of these other steps that are included in the process. So the hiring and the interview process doesn't just include hiring and interviewing. It includes the hiring team or the organization creating the job posting, you as the candidate applying to the job, then having the pre-interview process of them deciding who they want to interview. Then you have the interview and the post-interview process, which is where you actually go through the interviews as candidates, and the hiring team or organization evaluates and reviews the candidates and decides who they want to move forward with. Once they've decided on 1 or 2 candidates that they'd like to move forward with, they may move into the hiring process. The hiring process is where you've got all of those background checks, you've got your negotiations, etc. And finally, you have your final hire. The person who you've chosen is the best for the job, and ideally that is you, the candidate. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, remember to go ahead and give it a thumbs up And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life-work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, or ideas on the overall hiring process or specifically the interview process, please let me know in the comments below. I love receiving comments. I respond to each of them individually. So if you do leave me a comment, I will get back to you as quickly as I am able. Thanks, and I'll see you next week.